Welcome to another podcast episode of Indigenous Roots and Hoots, produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. Indigenous Roots and Hoots is about Indigenous people and culture, past and present, success stories and inspiring stories about Indigenous people and what they are doing today. Whether it's arts, music, sports, business, education, and so on, Indigenous people are affecting positive change in their communities throughout Canada. Our aim here is to create a better awareness about Indigenous people to help bridge the gap of understanding for the reconciliation process in Canada to grow.
Hello and welcome to Indigenous Roots and Hoots, a podcast produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. I'm your host, Gordon Spence, and today our guest is Darin James Corbiere, also known as Wiikwemkoong, meaning white bear in the Ojibwe language. Mr. Corbiere is an Ojibwe or Anishinaabe from the Wiikwemkoong First Nation on Manitoulin Island. Hello and welcome, Mr. Corbiere. Glad you can join us today. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing fine. Thank you. Maybe we can start by you just talking a little bit about your background, your family, your community, and where you grew up, and your cultural identity, just sort of some personal information about who you are.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm in a traditional greeting. I haven't done this in a long time. Wiikwemkoong Acast, Wiikwemkoong Don Jaba, Makwa Do Dem Ndao or Nin Dao. I'm a white bear, or also my Christian name or government name is James Darin Corbiere. I am from Wiikwemkoong on Manitoulin Island, and I belong to the Bear Clan. I was born and raised on Manitoulin and Wiki. Went to high school in Espanola, college in Sudbury. From the age of 21 until I was about 35, and an injury forced to return back to school. So I went to university in my mid-30s, got a degree in science and biology, and then one in education, and then in Wiki for a year at the Pontiac School. Since then, I've been an Indigenous language teacher in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario for the Algoma District School Board. And about 6 years ago, I started doing artwork. And 5 years ago, I moved out to Prince George, British Columbia, northern BC. And then just recently, I moved down to around Victoria, British Columbia. And that's where I'm at now.
Okay, one of your past jobs was working as a police officer in Sudbury and in Wiikwemkoong Territory, Ontario. Can you talk about your experiences working as a police officer in those places?
Working in Sudbury was amazing. There were only two Indigenous police officers in Sudbury at the time, and I was one of them. There was another one, Grant Dokis, who was hired on probably about a year or two before I was hired on. And you would think in Sudbury, with a large Indigenous population, that they would have more Indigenous police officers, but we were the only two. So a lot of my work was done downtown, where a lot of the Anishinaabe live, in the downtown part of Sudbury. I worked there for 5 years. I was a old-fashioned beat cop. I used to go on foot patrol in downtown Sudbury, and I'd often, double up with another police officer, and we'd operate the what they called the two-man car, the downtown car, at the time. And I can't remember what year it was. I'm not gonna be able to give you any years necessarily, but I think it was about early 90s that Wiikwemkoong entered into a tripartite agreement with the feds and the province to establish their own policing service on the reserve. And so what they did was they went out asking for police officers or for members, Wiki band members, to come home to help set up the first standalone police service in Wiki, right? The Wiki Tribal Police. And so there were a few of us who were contacted. I think myself, and there was the only other person that I recall speaking to about it was Stephen Jocko. Stephen Jocko is the son of Art Jocko. Art Jocko was one of the first constables in Wiki, and his son joined the OPP and was invited back to Wiki to help with establishing this police service. And I was the only one who answered the call. I worked there for 7 years, and I was injured, a back injury. I suffered a back injury while on duty. And my position ended there. They terminated my position because I couldn't go on patrol. In any event, that's how I ended up going back to university. And I loved what I did. I loved working for the people. I I hated patrol. Patrol was boring, but so was the paperwork. But it was a really enjoyable position to be in, and I liked policing. It was good. I enjoyed that. Yeah, worked with some really good people. Yeah.
Yeah, it must be a difficult job in some places, because I know at some reserves, you're a peace officer or a police officer, and a lot of these people that you know them as friends or relatives, and it can be a challenge for an Indigenous person working in their home community. Yeah,
it is. But some of the toughest arrests are made in your own hometown, right? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. You went back to school and attained a university degree in biology and education, enabling you to become a teacher teaching an Indigenous language. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, my teaching designation was as a science teacher, and when I was I was actually living in Michigan in the Sioux, just in a small town called Kinchlow, just south of Sault Ste. Marie at the time. And I was fully certified as a biology teacher. Late in the season, October, I put in an application for the Algoma District School Board, and within a couple of days, I got a call saying that they're a native language teacher, asking me if I could teach native language. That's not my specialty. I was born and raised in Wiki. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandparents and the family were there. The adults always spoke in Anishinaabe, but very rarely did they speak in Anishinaabe to me. Most of my upbringing was done in English, because my grandparents were afraid that that I'd probably be punished or something for speaking my language, right? And so they didn't speak that way to me. They spoke to me almost exclusively in English, but I heard everything that they had to say when they would talk to each other, right? Or to my older aunts and uncles. And so I picked up a lot of the nuance and the phrases and just the little aesthetics of the language that you can't pick up from an online course. All those little things. So I decided, okay, I told the school board, hey, I'm not 100% fluent, but I know enough to teach like some basic stuff like numbers and colors, and so they hired me, and that's how I became an Indigenous language teacher. I only had one class, which if you're into education, it was only a 0.3. I think that's what they call it. And in order to get a full-time job, I had to teach other things. So anything in the curriculum at the time in Ontario, anything with the word Indian or Indigenous or Aboriginal in it in the curriculum was kind of dropped in my lap to teach. And so that's how I filled up my full-time schedule, by picking up these other teachable subjects that no one else was qualified or wanted to teach. And so I also taught, in addition to the language, I also taught Native studies, Aboriginal beliefs, Canadian history. I would teach Canadian history, but what I would do is I would modify it to teach it from an Anishinaabe point of view, like all of these historical events about Canada, but from our side of the coin, so to speak. And then that's basically what I did for, probably about 10 years while I was teaching at for the Algoma District School Board. I also picked up some online courses or taught at Sioux College. I had an online course. I think it's still out there. The videos are on YouTube somewhere. But that was my time, and that was my teaching.
Right. You created a board game titled Truth and Reconciliation. How did this come about, and how has it impacted you, and how has it worked out for you?
Well, as I mentioned before, I was teaching for about 10 years, and anything with the word Indigenous or Aboriginal or Native in the curriculum, I'm a science teacher, right? I'm a science guy, not a social studies guy. So I had to learn all of these things. And as I went through the process of learning all of these historical facts, I basically compiled all this information into some lessons that I would teach. So I think it was 2015. Yeah, June 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out with their recommendations, with their report. And a year later, the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation put out a call to secondary teachers to come in to respond, help create a toolkit to respond to the recommendations contained in the commission report. And there were a number of us that got together from across Ontario, and we put together this toolkit teaching about truth and reconciliation. I'm not sure what happened with that toolkit, but one of the things that I was tasked to do was to come up with an activity to engage the teachers, because this was we were supposed to design a toolkit that would go out to all the high school teachers in Ontario that would give them a basic understanding of truth and reconciliation. So the two tasks the two products that I designed, one was a puzzle, and the other one was this game. And the union decided to go along with the puzzle, and I had this game, and I designed the game in May of 2017, and literally it was cut and paste. I printed stuff off, bought some recipe cards, put together a small game board. I did the artwork on the game board and on the player cards and things like that, and I presented, and I did this. I went to my class. And I said, okay, guys, we're going to study for the exam, because it was late May, early June, and we're getting ready for exams that summer. And I said, we're going to sit down, we're going to play this game that I've created. And we sat there and we played the game, and the students, they loved it. And eventually the initial version of the game had 52 cards. It was like a deck of cards, right? 4 suits of 13 facts each from Canadian Indigenous history. And basically when they pulled a card, it was like a trivia game. You would pull a card and it would have a fact from Canadian history. So for example, on July 1st, 1867, Canada is created. Yay, hooray, congratulations. And then below there are consequences for this truth or this fact. And the consequences are that Indigenous people across Canada began to lose all of their land. So in the game that I created, the Indigenous player has currency, and the currency is land, language, culture, and identity. And the goal of the Indigenous player is to circle Turtle Island 4 times, earn 4 eagle feathers, and if they still have a piece of currency. So if they have a piece of land or language or cultural identity, they're survivors. But if they lose all of their currency before they collect 4 eagle feathers, they become extinct and they're out of the game. So and that's the terminology that is used in the game: extinction, genocide, and anyway, the game was great. I got a lot of good feedback, a lot of good reviews. I incorporated elements of my artwork. I started doing artwork in November 2015, and going back even further than that, when I was a kid back in Wiki, I used to be able to see light. This is emotional for me. I used to be able to see light around people, and bad things started to happen at the church. I live just down the hill from the church. So and in those days the church had a important role in community life, church bazaars and things like that. But anyway, bad things started to happen there, and after a while I couldn't see the light anymore, and I didn't know that this wasn't a common thing. Not everybody was able to do this. And that I thought that was just normal, right? That people could see, when you look at someone, you could see lights around them. I thought that was normal. But for 50 years, or I turned 50, which was in 2015. Yeah, I got tired of running from the demons that the church left behind. So I decided I went on a fast and tried to reconnect with my old traditional ways, and that kind of cracked things open, and all sorts of stuff started to happen. And my artwork, I only began in November of 2015. So May 2015, I go on the fast, come to this realization that I'm tired of running from the demons. And then November 2015, I break down completely. I'm off work for PTSD related illnesses, I suppose, and then the artwork came out, and since then it's just been steady. I've probably produced about 300 individual pieces of artwork. Now, having said that, I produced several pieces of artwork that I incorporated in the game. We got to go back to the game here. The game, and then once the game was printed, I printed this game. Nelson Canada, the big educational publisher, one of the big educational publishers, saw the game. They liked the game, but because of my in the game, you had the Church and the Crown. The Church and the Crown, their goal is to strip the Indigenous players of every piece of currency to the point of extinction. Right, that's the goal of the Church and Crown in the game of Truth and Reconciliation. So the Church and the Crown also receive shame cards. That's one of the things that's a feature of the game is that shame cards are given out for awful things that the Church and the Crown have done historically. Every time, for example, let's just use Kamloops. Kamloops, the discovery of the bodies in Kamloops, the babies' bodies. The Church and the Crown would get 2 or 3 shame cards as a result of that, right? Or something like that, just to give you an example of where a shame card would be earned. So Nelson in Canada said that a large demographic in Ontario that operates part of the school system refused to acknowledge or they wouldn't buy the game if there were shame cards in there, because the school board didn't want their students questioning why the Catholic Church would be getting shame cards. Of course, they want their sheep to remain sheep, right? Anyway, so that deal fell through, and I've been sitting on the game ever since. I've had it set up at different events like powwows and things like that.
Yeah. Let me just stop here for a minute. I want to just, before we get into your artwork, that was kind of my next question.
Yeah.
Your board game or your game, do you have a website where people can find it and buy it?
It isn't for sale.
No?
Not yet. Like I said, the deal fell through with Nelson, and in order to, I've done all the homework. In order to produce the game, I'd have to come up with a substantial amount of cash. I need probably about $1.2 million.
Wow.
Yeah, and what I would like to do with that, given that number, is I would print 20,000 copies of the game, and then just go out and I'd give them away. Wow. Never mind hassling with school board regulations and things like that. I would just say, hey, you want a game of truth and reconciliation? Here you go. Send me your address. I'll mail one out to you. That's what I would like to do, because people need to know. People need to know this. Yeah. People need to know what happened. I mean, Canadians, a lot of them are aware of what happened, but only on the surface level, right? And this game would create greater awareness, I think, and a better understanding all around. I do have a website, easternwoodlandart.ca.
Okay, easternwoodland.ca.
Yeah. Eastern Woodland Art. Yeah.
Okay, so people are listening and want to contact you, they can go to that website.
They can go to the website. Yeah.
Right. Okay. You're an artist. Sounds like you're a gifted artist, a natural artist. Can you talk a bit about what you've done and what you're doing now?
Well, in terms of my artwork,
right.
Like I said, that's fairly recent. What I did was I grew up, in Wiki. I lived just up all my life. I was like 100 meters from the water, right down in Wiki Bay, just below the church. That's where I grew up. There's a it used to be a green and white house, James Corbiere's place, just above the marina, and that's where I lived and grew up as a kid. And I would watch elders go out in their big wooden boats. Like there's There's a guy, his name is Chidumnik. Oh, that's what we used to call him anyway. I think it's Dumnik Rekale, his last name. But he was a fisherman and a guide. He had this big wooden boat that he would come down and he would take it out almost daily, right? And he'd go check his fishing lines and things like that. And so it's always been a dream of mine to not just to own a boat, but to build one, right? I wanted to build this big wooden boat. And so I went to Garden River. Well, I was teaching in the Sioux, so Garden River is right next to the Sioux, and I bought a bunch of lumber from from the sawmills on the reserve there, and a bunch of ash. It was white ash. I wanted to use the white ash to build the frame, like the keel and the ribs for this boat that I was going to build. One night, like I said, November 2015, I had a shirt in my. There were pens in the shirt pocket, and I put the shirt down on top of this plank of wood, and one of the pens had broken, and the ink leaked out onto the wood, and it just began sort of like to take shape. It was weird because I began to see things in the wood or whatever, and I just continued adding more colors and adding, and then next thing you know, there's a piece of artwork, and it isn't something that I practice. I mean, I'm getting much better. I'm getting much more skilled at working with ink on ash, but that's sort of the stuff that I use. I use wood, and I follow the grains, or if you want to get technical, it's almost like a paint by numbers, where I just follow the grains, I follow the lines, and these images appear. Now, at first, people would ask me, like early on, well, how do you do this? Where does this come from? And all I can say after doing this for about 6 years is that sometimes the stories are there in the grain of the wood, and I think it's the tree or the earth or the water that holds these memories, and I'm just like an old-fashioned record player where you have the arm that has the needle that drops down. That's like my hand. You can imagine my hand being the arm, and then the pen is like the needle that drops down, and I'm just translating the information that's contained in the grooves of the wood, like the record would translate the information contained in the player would.
Oh,
Yeah, and so that's basically how it goes. I do commissions. People tell me stories, and most of my artwork is spirit lines. There's not very much in terms of anything. I don't know. If you ask me to do a portrait, I wouldn't be able to do a portrait. Like I can't draw a face, but I can draw something like it or close to it, and you have to use your imagination to be able to see it. So it's more abstract.
right.
Contemporary indigenous art. I don't use canvas. I don't use paint. I use ink on hardwood, and then what I've done is as my skill has developed, I've incorporated little copper bits. Again, because the copper is in the old days used to be sacred to Anishinaabe for our ceremonies, and so when I found this copper, I incorporated it into my artwork, and the artwork has been healing. All the colors have come back, right? Not in human form, I guess, in this case, but in the expressions through those pieces of lumber. There's been a lot of healing. There's this famous English story about a guy called Dorian Gray, and in the story about Dorian Gray, he gets to do all these nasty things while he's in human form, and then what happens is this painting takes on all of the damage for his bad ways, and so this is me getting rid of all of that bad stuff by putting it into the wood or into the artwork, and so I don't have to carry it, right? So that's how the artwork emerged, and depending on the what's in the air, I suppose, for lack of a better term. For example, when Kamloops when revelations of of what the church did in Kamloops came out back in June last year or end of May last year. There was a series of artworks that came out within probably about a week, and I did like 6 pieces of artwork, all of them related to experiences from the residential school. I never went, but aunties, uncles, grandparents, so many of my family, and then so many of my students. When I was teaching in the Sioux, so many of my students, their parents or grandparents went to Shingwak or Spanish, and tough to ignore when you hear so many similar stories. Like, I'm a police officer and I gather evidence, right? I'm a facts kind of guy. And when you hear so many different people from so many different places telling the same story over and over again, it's not coincidence, right? It's no longer a coincidence. You can write it off. Oh, well, once or twice. Oh, well, it's a coincidence. But then when you hear 10, 20, 30 or more people telling you about the same things over and over and over again, and then these people don't know each other, they've never met each other. Yeah. Anyway, so a lot of these later pieces have come out, and some of them are very provocative or controversial, and I need to those are the pieces that have been emerging lately. With the art. Yeah.
It's quite amazing that, artists are inspired in different ways, and just like you have, but you have a very interesting, background, very interesting background, being a police officer, a teacher, Indigenous language teacher, culture, a science teacher, and an artist. So, and you have pretty much a good round in life, in that you've experienced so much in your life. My last question has to do with something you're very familiar with, and it's about reconciliation. And we hear talk about people, the government, and different people talking about, oh, we need to have a reconciliation in Canada in order for Canada, to grow and become something new and better. How do you feel about this whole reconciliation thing, and to make Canada a better country? What are your thoughts and feelings about this?
Oh boy. Well, first and foremost, I think that the church should be held responsible for the crimes they've committed against Indigenous people. That's my firm belief. As a police officer, if I were investigating any organization that had bodies that were buried and unaccounted for, I would do my best to charge them and to bring them to court. And I think that's the first process that needs to be done, is that the church, the Catholic Church, the unapologetic bully in the room, has to be held accountable. Now, I'm not talking about paying money out. The church has billions and billions of dollars. They're hoarding it in the Vatican. What they need to do is they need to step up. They need to acknowledge that they made a mistake. They made a huge mistake. They have to apologize for the harm that they've done, and they have to make a commitment to trying to ameliorate the damage. Right? Rather than standing or hiding in a corner, they have to step up. They have to take responsibility. If you or I were responsible for causing harm to people, you or I would be taken to task, and we'd be held responsible, and we would be made to pay, right? Made to whatever the case may be. So that's what needs to happen, as far as I'm concerned, to start this reconciliation process. The church has to step up and live up to their preaching or their teaching, right? If you or I did that, the church would say, go confess, ask for redemption, seek redemption. Then that's what the church needs to do. They have to come to us. Hey, we're sorry. We messed up. These are not Jesus's teachings. Jesus would be pretty pissed off if he were here right now. Forgive us. We made a mistake. What can we do to help you? How can we help put you back together? Right? That's what the church needs to do. Right? That's what the church needs to do. From there, reconciliation runs really deep, because we're all messed up or running in a dysfunctional way. What we need to do is figure out that reconciliation isn't just between the church and state and indigenous people. It's between nations. So the people ourselves, we have to get along better with the Mohawks. The Anishinaabe have to get along better with the Mohawks or the Cree. There's reconciliation that needs to be there, because there are lines that are drawn that weren't there before, that are created by the colonizers. Those have to be erased. Our men, myself included, we have to go through the process of reconciling with our women. At least in my understanding of Anishinaabe society, we're not supposed to be dominant. Men are not supposed to be dominant. We're supposed to be servants to women, not servants, but partners. But our roles, we got to go back to our roles, our traditional roles of respecting, protecting, providing for our women. Right? That's our job. We have one job. That's all we got to do. We have to reconcile those roles as well. Reconciliation happens on so many levels. And what are we reconciling for? Right? You have to identify the problem. I think it was Eddie Benton Benai. He used to be a Manitoulin. He was the the head of the Manitoulin Society, and he was teaching over at Algoma. And I heard him one day he said in order to heal, you have to understand the wound. And so reconciliation, if this is a healing process, then we have to understand the wound, right? Why does the government, why does the church, why does Canada have to reconcile to Indigenous people? Well, here's what happened, right? This is your history, our history. This is our history. This is what you've done. This is what you created. You have to fix it, right? If I made this mess, the responsibility would be on me to go back and ameliorate things or fix things or make things better, right? That's always the responsibility of the person who's caused the harm. So that's what has to happen with reconciliation. It's not just government saying, "Oh, we're sorry," or I think the church needs to be investigated criminally. If I were still a cop, I would probably go before a justice of the peace, do up an information, officially charge the Catholic Church with genocide, and then let them defend themselves in court, right? Let them figure it out. That would be awesome. Anyway, sorry, I'm fantasizing here.
Thank you. Yeah. Makes you wonder why charges have been laid, but that's not really up to us to decide.
Yeah, well, some smart First Nations community can go ahead and process that information themselves, and that would really, I think, put the church on notice, because the only time that they began reacting last year when the Kamloops and all these dead babies' graves were being uncovered, the only time the church ever did anything was when their churches were burning down. Not that I condone burning down churches, but if it hits them in their pocketbook, right? If they're starting to lose property and assets, then they're going to sit up and they're going to take notice. But if it's Indigenous people, they're not going to care, right? If it's Indigenous people complaining about what happened at these residential schools, they don't care, right? But if you say, okay, well, you know what? All of your churches are built on Indigenous land. We're just going to go and take them back. And if you want these churches, then you have to apologize. You have to do something. You have to do something. All right. And, sitting there in silence is not enough. Right. Big bullies. Yeah. Big bullies. That's what they do.
Thank you, James. I've been talking to Darin James Corbiere. He's an artist, teacher, former policeman from the Wiikwemkoong First Nation, Manitoulin Island. Darin, James, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Legacy of Hope Foundation for taking the time to do this with us today. Miigwech.
Yeah, Miigwech, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Roots and Hoots is produced by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. For more podcasts like this, please visit our website at legacyofhope.ca.